Welcome back. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. We turn our focus now to housing. Now, this is one peculiar challenge again to the Nigerian space, and it's something that has continued to generate this debates and discussions across various forums. And on the program today, we'll be looking at one of these issues, or some of these issues, talking about the housing, the National Housing Fund, for instance, which shows that only about 60,000 of the 1.4 million registered contributors to this fund have been able to access mortgage loans. I will be having a conversation with an industry expert. He's also the CEO of AM Facilities, Mr. Femi Akintunde. Mr. Akintunde, good morning, and thank you so much for joining me on the program. Good
morning, Harriet. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. And hoping that I could be a homeowner someday, just like 171 and, counting million Nigerians. Let's talk about the housing challenge. Why do we seem not to have been able to sort it out?
Thank you. I think basically we're making progress. If you look at the available statistics of the 170 million Nigerians, World Bank has estimated that there are about 70 million housing gaps in Nigeria. That gap, World Bank has also estimated that it's going to cost us about $60 trillion to fix it, naira. When you divide that, it comes to an average of about 3.5 million naira per house. Where are we going to get the funding for this? If you divide the market to three strata, you have the high income level, the middle income level, and then the low income level. The bulk of the gap we're talking about concentrates at the bottom of the low income and the middle income. And what we're saying is, what are the challenges that are associated with the provision, the funding, and also the maintenance of those houses? Because it's one thing for you to provide something, it's another thing to be able to sustain it. Now, for the funding, the NHF was set up to help provide long-term fund for the housing sector. And the idea was to ensure that we can have fund at single-digit interest, about 6%, where somebody can access about 15 million once in a lifetime. However, what we've seen is, what is the source of this fund? It's supposed to come through both private and the public sector. The private sector, banks are required to make 10%, provision of 10% of their loanable fund available for housing provision. Then about 20% of the insurance company's fund raised through non-live funds is supposed to be made available to this. And 40% of the life insurance premium should be made available. Then government is supposed to match the difference. So in terms of funding, there is a policy in place. The act that set up the NHF, 1992, Act 3, made this provision. But are we complying?
That's the question I want to now ask you.
Exactly.
If this fund is supposed to be a national housing fund, okay, and it has an act that stipulated that the contributor could access a loan in order to get a home. From what you've said, for at least a house, you need 3.5 million naira to build, on the average, to construct a house. And for the, according to statistics that we see from the MBS, we know that we have a lot of people in the informal sector that do not earn as much as, 100,000 a month. But I want to be able to access that fund. What can individuals, companies such as yourself, do to help individuals who want to access this fund understand that, look, you can take this mortgage, to get a house, and we'll still back you up?
Okay. I see 5 key areas where that can happen, that intervention can happen. First is that government has to find a way to ensure that the fund is available. A bank that needs to put 10% of its loanable fund there at 6%, they're not getting the fund at 6%. So you are asking a commercial institution to lend to people at a rate that you predetermined when you do not have a means of providing the fund to them. I think that's going to be a tall order. So government has to provide certain incentives to the banks to be able to do that, and insurance companies, so that the earning can make more sense. And I'm looking at things like tax incentives. If you say 10% of that money, we have to treat it maybe one way or the other to provide some incentive for them through tax. And then also, they must also see this as part of their own social contribution, because it's social housing we're talking about here. So you cannot expect 100% profitability as you will expect from normal investment. Secondly, government themselves have to match the balance. And I'm saying we must set target for it so that everybody is held accountable. Government must be prepared to match whatever the private sector is bringing with at least 50%. So wherever they're going to raise the money, whether through bond or whatever, you have to make that provision. And there must be a monitoring framework in place to ensure that both parties put the fund down. That will empower the Federal Mortgage Bank. Once we do that, the next thing we have to look at is how do we provide the houses? How do we release the money to the people who want the loans? Some will come because they want to build it by themselves. They need access to land. Two major issues with that is the quality of title, because the loan cannot be used to buy land. You have to use it to build, to buy, or to renovate. So to buy the land, you need fund. And many times it's difficult for people to save money towards that purpose. So what we are looking at again here is to say that there must be a way of supporting even people to raise some form of bridge finance. And that is where some of the commercial institutions can also come in. If you look at that aspect, if I provide my own equity of between 10 and 30%, and I'm able to access the balance to make 15 million, then it's easy for me to take the loan over a period of about 30 years. So when you look at what is distributed over the period at 6%, it should be affordable to everybody. But then the next question is, once this is built through the individual, a lot of people can also get support through what we call social housing scheme, where government has to partner with reputable private developers who government will provide some support to, either by way of land at very, very low rates. And once they buy the land, they agree on how much they will build.
But then, Mr. Akintunde, we've actually seen situations like that where some state governments have actually, given land to private developers, go do a housing scheme there, and let's give it to some of our workers or citizens in the state. But then it doesn't seem like there are lots of companies that are taking this option. Yeah, because the incentive is not attractive enough. Government must understand that a private developer is in business to make profit. And if they have to do that, there's only so much they can let go in terms of wanting to support the government in provision of housing. But are these developers realistic? So they are also not realistic, and that is why we have to balance the two. If the developer sees incentive, he sees the opportunity to provide this housing, he also has to look at what is the methodology? Why is the cost increasing? We have to also look at using technology to build, because that's one way developed countries have been able to meet mass housing provision. We cannot continue to build using one brick at a time, assembling. So let's use technology. Let's get these developers to produce this housing and agree with government how much government is going to put down to them. Because if government says, I give you land, then sell at this price, and the guy looks at the economics. If it doesn't match, it will be difficult for him to do the next project. He will do one and walk away. So maintainability is the next thing. We've seen a lot of government schemes like this that are built. Look at Festac. Look at a number of Jakonde schemes. Good intention, well developed, well delivered. But after a period of time, they start degrading. We have to also put a scheme in place that allows the owners, the residents, to take responsibility for the maintenance of this asset, so that the money they have invested, the value doesn't get eroded due to poor maintenance structure. And in this case, we're saying
the Federal Mortgage Bank, if they have released money to you, part of the conditions is to see that the ones developed through the social housing scheme by developers, the maintenance structure for it, there's a control, there's a regulatory framework that keeps checking, monitoring that the condition of those estates are still good. And there must be sanctions in place. For those who are living in the estate, maybe as a result of disability or loss of employment or death or whatever, they can no longer pay. Government has to have a scheme in place to support those ones in paying the service charge. For those who are there that are not employed, the maintenance organization structure should be able to accommodate and create employment for people like that to also be part of the maintenance scheme. And then it keeps it going. We have to be able to sustain it. And then there must be public accountability. If we say, put this fund down, how is it being disbursed? We don't want, people are discouraged from contributing to this scheme because they've not seen how the scheme has helped them over the years, those who are participating. So we want to see a situation whereby there is a public reporting every year. How much did you mobilize this year? How much did government bring to match the fund from the private sector? Are the private sector putting what we said they should put down? And when it comes, how many houses have you built? How much did you spend per house? What is the maintenance structure? What is the value? Are more people joining the scheme? Are people pulling out of the scheme? So when the reporting structure is there and everybody knows that the public is watching, I think we will all sit up. The program will be more sustainable and Nigeria can begin to see increase in the provision of housing at this level.
Let's quickly run through some numbers I have here. Monthly contributions to this particular fund that we're talking about has been oscillating between 2.2 and 2.5 billion naira a month. Now, the FMBN has collected about 134 billion naira since the inception of the NHF in 1992. This is not even up to half of what you said that the World Bank says Nigeria needs in order to offset its housing deficit, which, funny enough, seems to have come down to about 14 million, not 16 million, houses anymore.
You see, statistics can be funny at times, the way we look at it. Some people say 14, 12, 16, 17. The bottom line is that we are far from the gap, from what we need to have in place.
But then we have some funds that at least people can go to access.
I'm not too sure about the funds. What we've heard from the Federal Mortgage Bank is that they're only able to meet the need of 1.5% of those who have subscribed. Out of 4 million, they have been able to disburse to only 60,000 people. About. Now, if you look at that, what it also means is that people will get discouraged because if I put money down and what is supposed to, the counterpart funding that should match it to enable the scheme to work in a sustainable manner is not coming in. That means FMBN is solely relying on the contributions of the people. And that cannot go wrong because we know it's small in the first instance. And that is the reason why government said they need to come to the aid of these people. But if government is not putting anything down, of all these things we are saying, let's ask the question, how much has government contributed to that scheme? How much has the banks, have they contributed? The insurance companies that were supposed to do 20% of their non-life and 40% of their life. Let somebody do the check for us and come out to the public and tell us over the last 10 years, how much of this fund since 1992 have really come into that scheme. So you cannot take my money that is trickling in and use it to do long-term investment. How will it sustain itself? So you are collecting money from 4 million people, aggregate it, you can only use it to fund 60,000 people. It doesn't add up. This is where the real challenge is. But it's even more than that because what then happens is that the remaining 4 million minus 60,000 have friends and families they are talking to. I've been contributing 2.5% of my income into this queue. I was told that by queue, I'm on the queue, and maybe it will not reach my turn in the next 10 years. So what you then see is that other people will not join the scheme.
It's a very
and then you
thought,
don't also forget that the Act also makes provision for you to exit. And you get 2% interest.
But how many people know that there's provision for you to exit?
You can exit on retirement if you want to. If you feel, look, I'm not going forward in this, but how much is the contribution we're talking about? So if you exit the scheme, so how easy is it for you to exit? That's another thing.
Another thing.
Getting money from government. There are so many issues that we need to deal with.
Let's catch our breath, Mr. Akintunde. We'll come back and we'll continue talking about some of those issues and, of course, best ways for us to solve these issues. Business Morning continues in just a moment. Please stay with us.